Hey loves, it's Marae Regal, and you're tuned into the Mo Show, where I aspire to inspire your mind, body, and soul. And it is the end of 2022, so my much anticipated and awaited 2022 book list. We're getting started now. As you can see, I have all these books over here because my goal this year was to read 18 books this year. Last year and the year before it was 12, like one a month. But I found that goal to be too easy, so I upped it to 18 this year. And you know, I'm in school, so reading textbooks plus reading books for my leisure, it was a struggle, but I'll definitely do it again next year. So this year I found out about an app called Goodreads. It's an app and a website called Goodreads, so I was able to track the books that I read, like when I read them, the time frame that I read them, and be able to give them stars, like how would I rate each book. And it helped me track when I read each book. So also at the front cover of each book, I put the like the month and the year. So I read this one January 2022. So we're just gonna kind of go in order. I'm going to give you a brief review of each of the books. Two of them I did leave at work, so I don't have them with me, but I'll talk about all of them from the app. So the first book I read this year was January, and it was Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This is one of my favorite authors. As you'll see, I have a lot of books. I read a lot of books this year and last year from Nick Stone, but Dear Martin was a sequel, or is a sequel to another book called Dear Justyce that I read. It was great. Let's see, what did I want to see if I can see. Oh, I gave it 5 stars. Now, I will say most of the books I read this year, I gave 5 stars. So I really like this book, and I really love this author, Nick Stone. So there's books by her in this series, the Dear Martin, Dear Justyce, and others. That was January. And I try to make a mix between like leisure, casual, and like self-help or historical, trying to teach me things. So then I read How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LePera. And I gave this book, let's see, I gave this book 5 stars as well. And I read this book in February 2022. So it talks about recognize your patterns, heal from your past, and create yourself. As you all know, I am a therapist, so I really recommend this book. Then I read Hood Feminism. A lot of these books were recommended to me. So if you're watching this and you recommended this book, shout out. Recommended any of these books I read, shout out to you. Hood Feminism, I read this in March 2022. And I gave Hood Feminism, it's notes from the women that the movement forgot. So it's about feminism, but about Black women feminism, because American feminism is centered around white women. I gave this 5 stars as well. Then I read Odd One Out, another one by Nick Stone. This is a little different. It's like teenage fiction, which I like, but it was, I don't know, it was a little different for me. But I did like it. I read this also, or I completed this in March, I guess I would say. And I gave this 5 stars as well, because I like a good fiction, like lighthearted. Like I said, I try to switch between lighthearted and something that's going to help me grow. And then I read Black Magic, What Black Leaders Learn from Trauma and Triumph. Now, I have to say, I thought this book, I read this book finished it in April. I don't know, I thought this book was going to be different than what it was. And it wasn't giving enough. So I gave this book, only 3 stars. Like, it just talked too much about trauma and like, instead it's like trauma and triumph, but I didn't really get the triumph aspect of it a lot. So that's why I gave this book 3 stars. Then I read Concrete Rose by one of my favorite authors, Angie Thomas. She's the author of the best-selling book, The Hate You Give, and I love her books as well. This Concrete Rose is like a prequel to The Hate You Give. I read this I finished this in May. May of this year. And of course I gave this 5 stars. I really, really, really love Angie Stone and Angie Stone books, as you're going to be able to see. Then I read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome and finished that in June. I really like this book by Dr. Joy DeGruy. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, but America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. This book was helpful to me because I learned a lot more. This was like a history book for me. I learned a lot more about the history of slavery and post-traumatic, like past, after slavery, the effects that we're still having here in the United States. I gave this book, I thought I really liked it, but I gave this a 3 as well. Maybe it focused too much and it didn't. I liked the information I got, but I thought I was going to get something different. Like I said, this was in May, so I'm not really sure. But there you go. You can read that as well. Dear Justyce by Nick Stone. Again, this is probably my 3rd book by Nick Stone that I read this year, and I completed this also in June. I gave this, I'm looking at my phone. I gave this 5 stars. It's a feel-good book. A sequel to the Dear Martin that I read at the beginning of the year. Then I read The Power of Regret. I got this book for my birthday, and my birthday in May, but I read it in July. How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. This was an interesting book. I wouldn't have chosen it myself, but I'm glad someone got it for me so that I was able to read it. And it just, by Daniel Pink, and it just kind of talked about, like, we think of regret as this terrible thing, but really, sorry, I'm trying to look back at, but really it's helpful in moving you forward. So I gave this book 5 stars as well. Then I read Emotional Detox and finished that in September. Yeah, I finished that in September. So I must have finished this book in August. Anyways, this is by Sherry Anna Boyle. And again, I'm a therapist. I love reading books on self-help and mental health and how to improve myself. So 7 Steps to Release Toxicity and Energize Joy. I really like this book too. And I gave this book 5 stars. I read Holier Than Thou in my Bible study group. Shout out to Women with Worth. We read this book. So we read this over a couple of months. I'm trying to figure out when I finished it though. Let's see. This is by Jackie Hill Perry, who we have grown to love in our Bible study. It doesn't tell me when I read it, but I gave it 4 stars. I want to say I read it through like July and August. 4 stars. Another Nick Stone book, Fast Pitch. Now this one, probably my least favorite Nick Stone book, but it's about this girl who plays softball. Too kind of teeny bopper for me, but I did like it. I read this also, or finished this also in September, and I gave it, let's see, how many stars did I give Fast Pitch? 4 stars. Then I read Blackout in October. Sorry, it's black on the cover when I wrote it. Now, I really picked this book out because it has a lot of my favorite authors in there. Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, and I learned more about a few more: Danielle Clayton, Tiffany Jackson, and Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. Now, this book was different. It's Blackout. Even love stories can glow when the lights go out. So this is all about a bunch of authors writing a book together. There are 6 different perspectives, 6 different stories going on in this book, but all centered around a blackout that happened in New York City. And so since they had a few of the authors that I really liked, I read this book as well in October, and I rated this 4 stars. Some of the stories, I just it didn't captivate me as much, but my faithful heavy hitters, they did their thing in this book. So I really liked it. And I like the packaging of this book too. It was nice. I also read a book that's not pictured called Anxious People, and my coworker recommended this book to me. It's something completely out of my comfort zone. I gave it 4 stars because I'm glad that I read something different, but I don't know that I'd read something like this again. I can't even explain it. It's not even about like, it's just like a kind of like a murder mystery in the way it's written. I think the people are from like, I don't know, they're from another country. Don't quote me on the country, but where is it at? Let me see if it tells me. I don't know. It was different. But I was just happy to be able to actually read that. And then I read a book called Better Than Carrots or Sticks, which I left at work. Restorative Practices for Positive Classroom Management. I give that 10 out of 10 stars, absolutely, because that was very helpful for me in my work that I do as a school counselor. I'm able to incorporate some of those techniques into more restorative practices, restorative justice practices, and hopefully be able to get some coworkers on board, some teachers to start doing those same things as well, which I know some of them are. So that was a 5-star book. Then I read Atomic Habits in November. Hands down, probably my favorite book I read. Well, my favorite book I read this year. Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results, An Easy and Proven Way to Build Good Habits and Break Bad Ones by James Clear. I literally took a full page of notes on this book, and it's really helped me so far. So I'm definitely recommending everyone read Atomic Habits. I got some of my friends on Atomic Habits. I got my coworkers reading it. Like, this is a really good book to help you get yourself started for the new year. And it gives you very practical ways to be able to do that as well. Then I read, this was another favorite. I did not expect, this kind of came out of the woodwork. I got this for free at a library event. Love is a Revolution by Renee Watson. I've never heard of her before, but I went and looked her up, and now I got a bunch of books on my list to read by her. I read this in December. Early December, and it's just like a teenage love story, but not the cheesy ones, not a super cheesy one. I definitely give this 5 stars. My genres I like self-help, I like historical books, and I also like love stories, but not like super cheesy love stories. I like Black love stories, young adult love stories, kind of like what I would like in a movie. But I really like this book. I felt it was heck of funny. Like, I was legit laughing out loud reading this. And I felt like I was feeling feelings as I was going through, like I was watching a movie. Like, no, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? I felt really invested in this book. So I really like this one. The last book, my 18th book I read is You Do You. Now, this is by Sarah Knight. She has a bunch of books. The Life-Changing Magic of Not Giving a F, Get Your Ish Together, Calm the F Down, and F No. No F's Giving God. So she has a bunch of she's like real passionate in her books. I gave it like a 3 or a 2. I finished this book the other day. It wasn't what I thought it was going to do, but it's like, you do you, how to be who you are and use what you got to get what you want. I mean, it was good. It just wasn't my vibe. So maybe for somebody else, but I finished it. To me, it wasn't a way to end my book tour, quote unquote, because it didn't end on a high note for me as far as all the books I've read this year. This is in the low bottom 5, but I did finish it, and we are moving on to new books next year. If you have any questions about these books, feel free to comment. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell that's right next to the subscribe button so you're notified every time I post a video. And I'm just holding this up because there's so many books I don't want them to all fall over. But thank you guys for watching. I hope I inspired you guys to start reading some more books in 2023.